Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. We're going to talk about feral people today. Now, I've seen this inverted pyramid conspiracy chart. And at the bottom of the conspiracy chart are things that happened. People make up a lot of stuff about it. For example, the JFK assassination. 9/11 is kind of in the medium, but there's enough mysteries about that, we don't need to explain it. But what I find curious, at the top there's some things that I believe. Antifa and QAnon are supposedly controlling the world. There's enough anti-Semitic garbage in there that it should be thrown out. But it mentions feral people. And while at first you might want to group feral people in with Bigfoot as something people see on the trail when they've been drinking, I think the idea of feral people is actually quite reasonable. Let's look at the idea. There's an idea that a group of people split off from the main group of Homo sapiens in their area and are living in relatively primitive conditions. As a matter of fact, feral, wild conditions. Well, at first this might be easy to laugh at. We do have archaeological and real-life evidence of this happening. The people of Sentinel Island in the Indian Ocean, while they are not feral in the sense that they do have a working society, and from what appears to be class divisions, they just kill everybody who gets near to them. You know what? It's their island. It's their right. The Indian Coast Guard actually keeps a watch on this particular island just to make sure no one gets trapped there by a sea wreck or a plane crash or anything, because the islander's going to get you. And we have uncontacted people in the Brazilian forest, probably other places too. Despite all of our modern technology, there's still a lot of things we just don't know about. Look at animals that can go missing for years or even decades at a time, and then a member of their species pops up and it turns out there was a breeding population the whole time. Feral humans seem ridiculously simple by comparison. There's a little phenomena that's well known in the deserts in the southwest area where people will just kind of go insane and walk out into the deserts. No water, no shelter, nothing worth a damn. And they're gone. Usually they find these people dead in a matter of days, but they don't find all of them. David Paulides, while you might have some issues with his methodology, you can't deny the fact that he documents a lot of cases where people of all ages go missing as part of a group, a tour group, a family group, whatever it is, these people still go missing. We know even within our own cities, the homeless, they have split apart from regular society and they gather in their own groups. They hang out with themselves because they understand each other's problems. And there's even a little bit of a tier system there. There's migrant workers who are homeless because they're traveling from farm to farm and making money. And then you have your stereotypical, drug-dealing prostitute who will do whatever it takes to get their next hit of crack. They tend to be among the lower ranks. But if we have communities like that forming in our cities, is it so ridiculous to assume the same could form in a forest? I would say quite the opposite. If you don't say completely feral humans, as in they've lost all their reasoning and have decided to become some sort of wolfman type creature, then I think feral humans make a hell of a lot of sense. I've been hiking through the woods and you'll see little, for lack of better, dens where someone's obviously been sleeping. And if you know what you're doing, you can actually survive quite well. A few years back, there was a gentleman, I'm pretty sure it was a guy, and he had just decided he had enough of society. So he went out and he survived the winter, because Canadian winters are horrible wherever you are in Canada, aside from maybe Paley Island. And he was living quite comfortably. He would break into a cottage, he'd help himself to his food, but he wouldn't really do any damage. He'd just make sure that he could survive another couple days, and that was his thing. But feral humans are not something exclusive to the modern age. So we can probably assume the First Nations had people go missing, but they're in a situation. Okay, First Nations people were not primitive, banging rocks together and sending smoke signals. They had a really advanced society. The same token, sometimes people just choose to get up and walk away from society. And on certain days, I'm sure you've had a fantasy something similar. Whether it's running away to Costa Rica and building yourself a nice little hut where no one's ever going to bother you. Trust me, watch the Survivor Man episode on that before you go. It's an eye-opener. And other than that, yeah, sometimes it feels real tempting to say, forget it. I'm done with people. I'm done with this. I'd rather take my chances on, berries and bunnies than I would another day being shouted at by my evil boss. It's an understandable mentality. And like I said, I bet every one of us has had it. The only problem is we don't have many documented cases. One of the first things you would learn as a feral human would be to avoid other humans. Imagine that. You're there in the Canadian arboreal forest, and you suddenly, from the distance, spy a hunting party. You don't want to get near them. They got guns. If they don't have crossbows, you want to avoid those things. So, yeah, you're going to stay well hidden. Even worse, if you come across a settlement, unless you know you can go in and get something real quick out of the garbage and not be seen, which is harder and harder thanks to surveillance, then it makes sense for feral humans to have not necessarily evolved, but adapted to the fact that they need to avoid other humans. It would make sense for them to gather together, because if I have 3 or 4 people, it makes my life easier. Let's leave aside the family and reproduction and everything, but just 3 or 4 people of roughly the same age, it makes more sense to give a division of labor. Maybe I'm better at finding berries. Maybe you're better at cooking. Maybe Billy, I don't know why I like the name Billy, I just like the name Billy. Maybe Billy's good at setting snares. And you see, everything you get to help each other's lives, just like the homeless people do in the city. One person's better at this, one person's better at that. What disturbs me is that something so logical winds up on the highest scale, the most, you are about to lose touch with reality scale of the paranormal conspiracy pyramid. Like I said, it's not so unbelievable to imagine. And as a matter of fact, I can probably give you I could argue in a court of law. I don't think I could argue in a court of science, but in a court of law, I could present enough circumstantial evidence to convince a jury that there might be feral humanoids out there. As a matter of fact, that's kind of what I just did. Science requires evidence, and I don't feel like walking the Trans-Canada Trail, following all the individual trails to figure out where they go, just to find a couple people that are living outside the realm of society because they were love kids from the 1960s, and that's just always been the way that they have. No, that's not my job. Sounds like it could be fun for the right person, but not for me. So why is this as harmful as believing that there's an Illuminati, or there's a New World Order, or that QAnon is spreading disinformation, or that any combinations of Russians, Chinese, Indians, Italians are controlling the world and your local area? Why are feral humans so high on the list? Bigfoot, I can kind of understand because, after 50 years, is it, since the Patterson-Gimlin film? The famous one of the Bigfoot walking away, and we're still arguing over it. Yeah, but we're trying to prove a different species with Bigfoot, something that's not human. Whereas with feral humans, We're proving that humans are acting like humans. Some humans were meant to live in society. Some were not. This is why we do have places like insane asylums. They don't call them that anymore, but because those people cannot fit in with society in any way, shape, or form. I'm not saying that feral humans are insane. They don't slot into society. There's a big difference between those two conditions. One is you are a danger to yourself. The other is you're walking away. Remember Michael Caine in Falling Down? Was it Michael Caine? I suck with actors. But the movie Falling Down, where he just lost it one day. We find it reasonable that a person can snap and go ridiculously violent. But we're not supposed to find it realist that somebody could snap and decide they wanted to live in the forest? Yes, for most of us, the forest is pretty remote. We live in big cities. We live in, huge developed infrastructures. Whereas I know you go a couple hours in the right direction, and you've got yourself into entirely different territory. Most of it's owned, but if you know what you're doing, there's still enough crown land that you could probably set yourself up in pretty comfortable conditions, provided you know what you're doing. Now, this will not be an easy life. The Inuit can do it, but the Inuit prefer having, planes come in and give them supplies, because up north, you got 6 to 10 weeks, depending on the year, and you never know which, to gather your wild edibles, to do your trapping. And after that, if you don't hunt and you don't fish, you starve. And that's the real truth to survival anywhere. Maybe feral humans have overcome that because they would have to survive more than one single season. Hunger is a real thing. That old Disney film, Nanook of the North. What it doesn't tell you is Nanook was not his real name, and he died 2 years later because he starved to death. Yes, a Disney star. They packed up, left him behind, and he got caught in a bad situation where he couldn't find enough food, and the poor guy starved to death. And most of the squishy humans we have down here in the city are not prepared for a survival ordeal. Silverlight and his friends did a little bit of a survival camping trip, half as a joke, half of a serious test to ourselves a little bit ago. And we were going to be capable of surviving, but the camp that we chose had a fire ban on. Now, here's your tricky situation. If you have fire, you can boil water. You can, wash up. You can do all sorts of good things. But if you're not allowed fire, it becomes a lot harder to survive. And unfortunately, fire gives away your presence. So these feral humans would probably have to avoid dealing in fire. There's still areas of the country and the continent that you could find a place to stay and stay settled there. It just becomes a little more difficult. Now, is my grip on reality fading because I believe there might very well be feral humans? I also believe in the possibility of Sasquatch, but I believe it would be very difficult to hunt it down for much the same reason I think hunting down feral humans would be difficult without a full dedicated teams on the ground and a helicopter, and they're going to do everything in their power to avoid you. In the military, Silverlight was well known for picking good hiding spots, because the way I usually got caught on exercise was people tripped over me. Yes, I'm a big 6'3" guy, and I was so well hidden people would trip over me. If I can do that with a whole bunch of military-trained people looking for me, I'm sure other people could learn the skill, because I didn't have any special training as far as that goes. It was just Silverlight learning how to do stuff the way that he needed to do it to survive. Why are feral people such a dangerous conspiracy? The only reason I can think of is it offers the possibility of something beyond society, something where we are not the ultimate answer. Again, probably during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, people had the idea that they could leave all this behind and go live by themselves on a patch of land. Survivor Man, Les Stroud, has a place not terribly far from here, and he's mostly self-sufficient on everything. Grows his own crops, has his own solar power, stuff like that. It is possible. And I mean, if you're not choosy on the laws you decide to break, it could be done. You probably wouldn't break the murder law, but a little bit of stealing, you're feral, you don't care about the laws. You get caught, you wind up in jail. And while that's a little bit worse, you at least get to eat. No assaulting people, because again, you're avoiding people. But, for 6 months of the year, there's nobody going to be around there. There's a lot of possibilities, a lot of opportunities. So why is believing in feral people such a big deal? Normalize feral people. Let's recognize more than likely they exist. As a matter of fact, there's no reason for them not to exist. There's enough people that go missing in a year. Even if 10% of those people wind up wandering around, they're sooner or later going to wander into each other and become a little feral tribal band. I don't have a problem with that. And if you want to come after me and tell me that I'm dangerous to society because I believe some people are wandering around in the vastness of the Pacific Northwest forests, I think we know who the problem is. Anyways, we wish to thank you for joining us for this episode of the Silverlight Show. If you did, please hit like, share, subscribe. Don't forget to buy a book with the link listed down in the comments, and we hope you have a fantastic day.